Greetings everyone, my name is Dr. Jason Freeman. I'd like to welcome y'all to my channel. So I recently did a reaction video to the 1995 film Dead Presidents. And at the end of that video, I announced that I was going to do another video where I looked at the key themes from that movie. And so in this video, I'm going to be identifying 3 key themes that I noticed while watching that film. Theme number 1. The loss of innocence. Now the most obvious example of this is Anthony. So Anthony at the very beginning is this happy-go-lucky kid. He wants to travel. Skip kind of teases him about, when he says he wants to, when Anthony says he wants to see the world, Skip says, well, you think you're rich or something? And so you have that kind of optimism. Even when he has that family dinner and he's basically saying, I have my own life, I'm 18 years old, I want to make a name for myself, I'm not ready for college. I remember that key part. And so you have this innocent child essentially. But of course he goes to war and he is traumatized. He's forced to kill people. At the very beginning, when you first see him in Vietnam, a good friend of his dies essentially in his arm. He's forced to kill another friend who had been essentially castrated and gutted, played by, I think, Michael Imperioli. And so, yeah, you see that loss of innocence. And so the person that leaves New York, the Bronx, New York, to go to war is a very different person who comes back. Another example is Delilah. So you have the 2 sisters, Juanita and Delilah. Delilah is the first sister that we're introduced to. She clearly has a crush on Anthony. She opens the door, you can kind of see it in her eyes, see it on her face, but Anthony wants Juanita. And so the idea is that Delilah is this innocent student, this young girl who's focused on her studies. And then by the time we see her after Anthony comes back, she is now a revolutionary. You could say she's been radicalized, though again, fighting against oppression at a time when you have Jim Crow and all sorts of things going on in the South, and even in the North as well, I wouldn't call that radical. But the point is, she has changed. The innocence that we see that young girl at the beginning of the movie, having gone through college, having seen changes, the civil rights movement, is now a very different person. And lastly, there's Sarah. Now, a lot of her loss of innocence is alluded to as something that is going to happen. So with Sarah, there's this argument in the scene between Anthony and Juanita in front of Sarah, and the Hughes brothers does this really good shot where it's focused on Sarah, this little girl who doesn't say anything. She doesn't speak. Well, let me change that. I think she might say like "dada" or something at one point, but she doesn't really say much. But it's all in her face. She's looking at her parents. She just met her dad. Obviously, her mom's been there the whole time. And it's like, what's happening? Like, she doesn't really understand what's happening. And so now we're starting to see the loss of her innocence. Theme number 2. The ever-present temptation of easy money through criminality. Now, at the beginning of the movie, we meet a bunch of characters. We meet Anthony, of course, who's the main character. I think he's running numbers, this kind of criminal enterprise. Also, we have the introduction of Kirby. And so with Kirby, you have this veteran who lost his leg in the Korean War. Presumably, that's what we're told. And so he's doing some kind of underground economy as well. Paying off the police, going in, maybe a loan shark. He goes and he beats up a guy at this barbershop or something. He throws the guy through the window. But the point is, he has this underground kind of operation. And of course, the big opportunity, the big temptation comes with the heist. The U.S. government has these this currency that they have to dispose of, and so like the old money essentially. And so the money's there. It's going to be incinerated. It's not going to be used by anyone. And so they feel we can go take it. And so that temptation really drives the second, or really the last act of the film. It leads to death and destruction. It leads to imprisonment. I talked about the loss of innocence already. And so that temptation, where you have a guy in a legit job trying to make ends meet, trying to support his family at the butcher shop, that temptation draws him in to the point where he's risking it all and losing it all for money. And lastly, I also include the relationship between Juanita and Cuddy as being kind of also the temptation of criminality. It's told to us that Cuddy is a pimp. We know that he's a criminal, And so with Cuddy, you know, Juanita turned to him when Anthony's off in the war. She doesn't really have the means to kind of support her and her child. They start seeing each other, and therefore she brings this criminality into her life, into her world. And the third and final theme I want to touch on is something that we saw throughout the movie. And basically, it's veterans basically self-medicating to deal with the trauma of war. And so with Anthony, he has an alcohol problem. He drinks a lot. Juanita mentions that. And so, you know, he goes through the trauma being part of Force Recon, seeing the death and destruction of war, killing people himself, watching people die around him, losing friends, killing a friend. All those things drive him towards self-medicating. He's having these nightmares that we see an example of, and then later on Juanita says that he's having these nightmares periodically, and so with these nightmares he's turning towards alcohol to try to deal with the pain. Now of course Skip, we see that he's on heroin. When Anthony comes back and meets up with Skip, he's clearly on something. Again, we learn that it's heroin, and he talks about something got in him over in the war. We know about Agent Orange as being a defoliant that essentially poisoned people, and so that's likely what they were alluding to. The Hughes brothers, or the writer, also the writer of the film, kind of is alluding to that he's experiencing, but also just the trauma. The last battle that he's in that we see, you know, he basically freezes up, which is actually, as I mentioned in my reaction video, is a normal reaction. A lot of soldiers in whatever war you can think of, you know, in the time of battle actually freeze. It's you know, fight or flight. You don't fire your weapon. You try to hide. You try to protect yourself, which is a natural human inclination. And so, you know, he's dealing with that trauma. He's dealing with the things that he's done, that he's seen. Again, he's murdered people. He's done horrible things. And so heroin is this way of dealing with the pain. And last but not least, I'm going to get to my least favorite character in the movie, and that is Cleon. So Cleon is not, as far as we know, on any drugs. He's not on anything that we would consider a medication, but I would argue that he's self-medicating using religion. And the clearest indication that he's using religion essentially as self-medication is that after the heist, when he talks about, you know, penance and sinning, he says that he will pay his penance. Again, you framing all the suffering, all the mistakes, all the issues, including the loss of Delilah during the heist, in religious terms. And so in a way that Anthony uses alcohol and Skip uses heroin, that's the same way that Cleon uses religion that kind of help as a salve against the pain that he's dealing with and the horrible things that he's done. Now, if you found this video interesting and or informative, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please share this video. And if there are other films you want me to do like a deep dive on and look for the themes in the films, please leave those suggestions in the comment section below. Thank you all for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.